Well, good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer, and I hope you're enjoying your summer. It's been a hot one so far. We've had a fair amount of weather. I haven't heard many people talking about drought lately, but I said fair amount of rain. That's what I meant to say. Talking about droughts lately, but it has been hot. But it's summer in Washington, D.C. If you're here, all you can do is complain about it because it's not going to get any better. But anyway, we're switching things up a little bit today because one of our guests is joining us on a very tight schedule. In just a moment, we'll welcome Ward 6 Council Member Charles Allen. Earlier this summer, Councilmember Allen introduced legislation addressing the emergence of autonomous vehicles and what this rapidly evolving technology could mean for transportation in the District of Columbia. And last week, the Washington Informer hosted a community conversation introducing residents to Waymo, one of the nation's leading autonomous vehicle companies. Today, you'll hear directly from Councilmember Allen about his legislation, followed up by a brief excerpt from our Waymo panel discussion. And if you'd like to watch the complete conversation, the full video is available on our YouTube channel. Waymo is one of several companies that will be coming that are vying for the opportunity to operate in the district. And so Councilmember Allen will be talking about the hearing and the process about how this will take place, and also getting the community's input on bringing autonomous vehicles to the District of Columbia. And later in the program, we'll be joined by the District of Columbia's State Archivist and Public Records Administrator, Dr. Lopez Matthews Jr., who will share valuable advice on preserving your family's history and important documents for future generations. But let's go ahead and begin by welcoming Councilmember Allen to Let's Talk. How are you?
Doing well. Great to see you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, likewise. I know time is tight, but you have this hearing coming up on the 13th. So I wanted to make sure we got an opportunity to get the word out because there's a lot of interest in autonomous vehicles. So tell us about the legislation and why you decided now was the right time to bring this legislation forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're holding a hearing on Monday on the bill, but just in brief, we've seen a lot of cities around the country have started moving to incorporate autonomous vehicles. So some people call them robo-taxis, but essentially having these vehicles operate on their city streets. It's innovation, it's technology. It to me is an interesting idea and concept. In DC, you've actually probably seen some of these vehicles. They've been testing for like the last 2 years, but they have to have a person behind the steering wheel while they've been doing testing. But we don't really have a legal mechanism to take the next step to continue that testing and then eventually have their operation in the district. And I want to see what this would look like. Proponents certainly argue that autonomous vehicles provide a safer trip. And as somebody who's deeply concerned about safety on our streets and how do we help reduce traffic injuries and fatalities, I'm interested in that and what technology can help us do that. I'm also, though, I've kind of said before, I don't necessarily want DC to be the first. I don't want us to be the last. I do think we want to be a city that welcomes innovation and technology that can make our city work better, that connect people and neighborhoods in a better way. But I also want to make sure we're crafting a solution to this that works for DC residents, works for our DC neighborhoods. And that's what the hearing will be. We've got 80, 90 people signed up to testify. It's going to be an all-day hearing about a topic that people have some pretty strong feelings about one way or the other.
But DC won't be the first. Is that correct? I mean, autonomous vehicles are already operating in other parts of the country. Is that right?
Correct. So several cities already have this. So Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Atlanta. There's a number of cities that have already put autonomous vehicles on their roadways. So like I was saying, I don't necessarily want DC to be the first because we've also seen problems that have happened in those cities. So we can learn from what those cities have done. But I don't think it's a question really of if autonomous vehicles will be on roadways. To me, it is a question of when. And so how do we make sure we're going to do it right for DC? I don't want to chase Austin and Atlanta and LA just for the sake of it. I want to make sure it's actually something that's a positive and contribute to life here in DC.
So explain to me, Councilmember Allen, what role the council, I mean, the legislation basically gives what? Does it give permission for, in the end, will it give permission for autonomous vehicles to operate in the district? And then if so, I mean, I figure there's stages. Public safety is one, accountability is another. So how does the legislation address particularly the public safety issue? I know at the hearing, I'll just say quickly, a woman came up to me who I think you may know, who talked about she was in a serious accident. And she came really anti autonomous vehicles, but after listening to the hearing, she saw that it sounded safer than what she had anticipated. But who's accountable when it comes to public safety? And is that part of what the legislation will deal with?
Yes. So the legislation starts to lay out a legal pathway to eventually get to commercial operations. Right now, there is no pathway in DC where they can ever get beyond just the testing. So it lays out a pathway that you could see commercial operation. But understandably, there's a lot of folks who say, I don't know if I want to get inside a car where I don't see a person driving it. So there's hesitancy, there's questions. They're all healthy and constructive types of questions that we have to go through. But there's also novel things. I mean, if there was a collision, if somebody was injured, who do you sue? Who holds the insurance? What are the legal requirements around the accountability? These are the types of things we've been wrestling with in this legislation. And I've worked closely with, for example, the DC Trial Lawyers Association to think about what would liability look like. Are you suing the company? Are you suing the owner of the vehicle? Are you suing the person that wrote the code in the computer? Really trying to think through how you make sure that in the event there is a crash or an injury, the person has a legal mechanism to be able to hold them accountable. And then from the city's perspective, I am not interested in just letting cars just randomly go all over the city. What do we want out of it? How do we help ensure safety and accountability? They're going to make a lot of promises. These are major corporations that stand to make a lot of money. And so these are companies that are owned by Amazon, owned by Google. So I don't want us just chasing it because it's kind of cool technology. I want us to know, are we making DC better? Are we actually improving lives? Are we improving safety? And what are the checks on that to ensure that all the promises that they're making, because they stand to make a lot of money, how do we make sure that it's good for DC and we can hold that accountability? So those are some of the questions we're really working, and I know we'll talk a lot more about on the hearing on Monday.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because as you know, the event that where we invited you to speak, and thank you for coming, was actually sponsored by the Informer with the support presented by Waymo, one of the companies. But you mentioned others, right? And so that's also a question. Once, if this proceeds, will it be? I think about the old taxi days when you had a variety of taxi cabs you could use. Will there be? Will this allow multiple companies, or will it be sole? Okay.
Yeah. So right now, the two major kind of companies and firms that you'll hear about are Waymo, which is owned by the same company that owns Google, so it's Alphabet. And then there's another version called Zoox, Zoox, and that's owned by essentially the same folks with Amazon. So those are the two big players in the market right now. But this would allow a pathway for any company that wants to be able to show that they can test, show they have the capacity, and then they have to demonstrate a track record. And what the law does is it lays out stages of where you have to test and prove what you can do, that you can do it safely. And then it slowly builds you through that process to then eventually get to full commercial operation.
Okay. And one of the questions that someone raised, we thought about, a lot of people don't like driving the Beltway. So they go through the city as opposed to around the city. But these what your legislation does really affects what happens in the District of Columbia.
Exactly.
So for someone who might be traversing from DC to Maryland, that Waymo is going to drop them off at the border. Is that correct? Or how is it going to work?
It's not going to work well if the car just kind of stops at the border and you got to hop out. But you're right. So I can write the laws for DC, but I can't write the laws for Virginia or Maryland. So as of right now, Maryland and Virginia have not passed legislation allowing for this operation. Maryland's a little bit closer. They very likely will move something forward in their state sometime next spring. But right now, if you wanted to catch a Waymo or a Zoox in DC and take it to National Airport, you can't. It won't be able to go into Virginia. It can't go into Maryland. So this would only be for rides that begin and end inside DC.
And I have a question here. I'm not sure even if I understand the question, but it's what protections does your legislation include to safeguard residents' privacy? And is privacy an issue?
Yeah, it's part of what we're going to explore a little bit more on Monday.
Yeah.
So, for example, you're going to, just like any app, you're putting a lot of personal information in, but that's going to be true whether you're calling an Uber or a Lyft or things like that too, right? So, how do we have that privacy protection? I've had people ask me questions too. These vehicles come with LiDAR and radar and a lot of technology that is essentially taking pictures and scans of the environment around it. So I'll use an example. You're walking on the sidewalk or you're walking in a crosswalk. That vehicle sees you. In what way is it collecting information about you? Think about when you go through an airport and you go through the screener and you got to put your hands up and it's fairly invasive, the pictures it's taking. Right. I've had people ask me, is the LiDAR and radar taking that level of picture that it's collecting that about you just when you're walking in the crosswalk? We're going to ask a lot of those types of questions during the hearing to the companies that are coming. How are you collecting information? Where does it get held? And what is our expectation about your privacy when you're in a public space?
And how, for those who are, I know there's other questions about people who, have literacy issues, as well as people who have physical disabilities, right? Wheelchair bound folks or, what have you. Will this be, if it comes into fruition, will this be a means of transportation that they can consider?
I think it's important to remember, the disability community is not a monolith. And so we have heard, for example, from the vision impaired and blind community that this could be a really big game changer in terms of having greater access to be more independent in mobility because they can hail a Waymo and be able to feel confident getting into that vehicle, right? I've also heard, though, from the disability community, if you are in a wheelchair, if you have other physical disabilities that are limiting you, is there's no person in there to help you pick up that wheelchair and put it in the car. So these vehicles do not work for that. And I think one of the questions we want to look at, in the same way that we actually have written into law that taxi cabs have to have a certain number of their fleet, they're wheelchair accessible, should we have the exact same requirement of a Waymo or a Zoox or any one of these companies? Because we're talking about transportation in the public space. And again, we're creating a legal framework for them to operate and, remember, make a lot of money in DC. So how do we make sure this works for DC residents? And if it's leaving out a significant number of our DC residents, for example, that are in a wheelchair or have other mobility challenges, then we're not doing right by our city. So we got to make sure it works for everybody.
Well, it was a real pleasure the other day outside of the Atlas Theater on 8th Street to meet Curly, and I can't remember his last name, who actually is one of those drivers, right? So we're talking about jobs. And I told him, I said, I think I've seen you before because I've taken photographs of the Waymo vehicles that I've seen on. He said, well, if it's on Mass Avenue, I said, yeah, that's what he said. That's me. He said, everybody has a picture of me, right? Because they've been taking pictures of the vehicle. But I asked him, talking about jobs, right? I said, how did you end up becoming a test driver for Waymo? And I don't know what kind of background or experience he had, but he was told that, there was a job available and he could drive a vehicle and around the city. And he could tell you everything you wanted to know about the vehicle. The other question I asked him, I said, a group of people are out and, people pile into cars. He said the vehicle is going to require you to have a seatbelt. The car will not move without you putting on the seatbelt. But I do want to talk about job opportunities because some people believe, that this may destroy jobs. Some people think it's going to increase opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this is technology that it's a disruptor by its nature, right? It comes in, it's new technologies, innovation, and whenever that happens, there are workforce impacts. So in the cities that have moved quickly to adopt this technology, what we have seen is that very quickly, a large number of these vehicles are deployed out onto their city streets. So for the person who's, picking up probably a second or third job, hustling to be able to help pay the rent, and they drive an Uber, they drive Lyft, they could be impacted by this. And I think they will. I don't think it should be an if. It is. They will, right? This will be a disruptor. So part of what we're trying to do in the legislation, it recognizes that. We don't try to pretend it's not going to happen. We recognize there will be a jobs impact. And so we actually set up a fund where a lot of the permit fees that these companies will have to pay to operate in DC can actually go to help with workforce displacement around either directly compensating people who lose their jobs or helping with retraining and workforce opportunities to help that individual transition to something else. But the companies themselves talk about new jobs being created, be that in fleet maintenance, be that in electricians and engineers that will be involved in this work. So it'll be something we continue to explore on Monday, but I think we should be very clear-eyed. It does have the potential to be very disruptive to a workforce. And how do we as policymakers think about how do we protect those workers? Now, I'll also be candid. Let's not pretend Uber and Lyft are great places to work. I mean, they take advantage of workers. They are contract workers. They don't come with health insurance or benefits. They are taking advantage of a contract worker. So we got to be really thoughtful about how do we help take care of people who, in all honesty, are hustling to help pay to live in this city or in this region when it's so expensive. And they're usually Uber drivers that are picking up second, third shifts, trying to pick up a few hours a week, just trying to make ends meet. And if that job goes away, what happens to them, to their families, to their households? So we need to be very thoughtful about that.
Well, I'm glad we, first of all, thank you for coming and joining us today to have this conversation. And I hope that people who hear this it'll spark their interest if they're not going to be there to testify, but at least to watch the hearing on Monday. And I always want to remind folks, how can they access public hearings, no matter where they are? I know you can watch online, but is there a shortcut you have for telling people how to get there?
We will certainly be broadcasting from our social media channels. And I know you've got those listed on the site, so I appreciate that. The links to how you can follow online live. It's broadcast on DC Council's TV channel. And of course, it's a public building. It's a public meeting. It's a public hearing. So anybody who actually wants to come down and see it in person, we encourage that as well. So we'll be here at the John A. Wilson building, but we'll have it on our YouTube channel, on social media. And so encourage everyone to tune in. I find very few people are indifferent. They have strong feelings about autonomous vehicles, either very excited and supportive or very much concerned and anxious about it. So we're really trying to navigate and respecting a lot of people's feelings and considerations around this. And it should be a very exciting hearing on Monday.
And Monday's not the end of the conversation. So there will be a period where people can still submit. And I found out you can even submit video testimony now. Like, whoa.
Yeah, people can. Yeah, absolutely. This definitely is not the end. So this will be the first conversation essentially as a public hearing. Then we will continue to get people's testimony, their thoughts, their input. And then we'll work on this over the next couple of months and see if there is consensus, if we can build towards that to be able to move something forward.
So there's no deadline to submit your questions or thoughts or anything?
There's a deadline in that the record for the hearing closes. Right. It's usually about 2 weeks after the hearing.
Okay.
So I'd encourage people to get their feedback by then. But I mean, I'm a public official. Anybody who wants to share their thoughts, you're able to do it. So email, call, tweet, whatever you want to do. That's a good way to make sure we hear it.
All righty. Well, Councilmember Charles Allen, I want to thank you very much for being with us, for sharing this information. And we're going to be following this.
I know you will.
So we'll be talking more about it and we'll see what happens. But thank you so much for watching us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Denise.
All righty. Have a good one. So we're going to take a few minutes for those. I keep mentioning the town hall that we had that the Washington Informer sponsored in conjunction with one of the contractors, potential contractors, and that's Waymo, last week at the Atlas Theater. And we were very grateful that people did show up. They were allowed to ask questions because we want to do our part to make sure that the community is involved and has a stake in what happens here for many reasons, as Councilmember Allen just mentioned. So I think we're going to take a few minutes to watch the panel. We want to share that with you. Know that you can see the entire panel discussion anytime by visiting our YouTube channel at Washington Informer TV on YouTube. So I'm going to have us to move on to that right now, and then I'll be back in just a second. Welcome, everybody. I am really excited to have this conversation this evening. I want to start with you, Anwar, and I know we had some prepared questions, but I want to just ask you this because we talked about it downstairs. And, you talking about 8th Street, everything that the council member mentioned today about traffic in the city, you have seen it here on 8th Street.
That's correct.
And I'm just curious, because you are a pro-Waymo advocate. I won't say advocate, but supporter. And there are a lot of reasons why you could not be, but you are. Why?
For one, I think it would bring jobs to the city. You know, I train during the summer anywhere between 80 to 100 summer youth. And we teach them artificial intelligence, motorsports. We teach them robotics. This year's robotics. And we think this have a connection to jobs. That I believe that if we train the kids right and Waymo have a opportunity, that it creates jobs for them on the ground level. You don't have to go to school, you have to go to college for this, and they pay very well. You know, I started off as a bus cleaner at Metro many years ago, and I retired as a mechanic, supervisor. And did I go to school for it? I've never been in a school for diesel mechanic. And that provided an opportunity. I think Waymo will provide the same type of opportunity. You go in at a low level, and you have job opportunities as a cleaner, and you can work your way up. And you also have job opportunities as a service provider, and many other technicians and many other opportunities. But you don't have to go to school for these things. You get training for it, on-the-job training, and guess what? As you grow, you get more money, you're able to take care of your families, you're able to pay the expenses, high expenses in Washington, D.C., and I think provide these opportunities.
Wonderful. I want to jump to you, Tiffany, because we also had a chance to talk a little bit. It was great to meet you. Tiffany's been in D.C. for 30 years, y'all, so...
I came when I was very, very young.
So she could almost qualify for Native Washingtonian, but, Native Washingtonians have our restrictions. But we certainly do love the fact that you have decided to make the District of Columbia your home. And, I mean, just like Anwar, what are some of the important considerations that you all put into play as it relates to autonomous vehicles in the District of Columbia?
Well, first, let me thank you for everything that you and your father have built with Washington Informer. I think it's an incredible legacy, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. I think it's important to kind of level set. One of the things we talk about is Waymo being the most trusted driver. I was excited to hear that there were so many people who had been in a Waymo. But on the other side of that, how many of you have been in an accident? How many people are driving DC streets and you see someone on their phone, or they're, angry or upset, or they may have been drinking coming from, one of the wonderful many establishments we have here in Washington, D.C. So it's really about making our roads safer. That's fundamentally let's level set. That's one of the most important things and what our mission is. And Waymo allows that to happen, for us to have safer technology, greater mobility. Our data shows over 220 million miles driven that we are 93% fewer serious crashes or worse in a Waymo than a human driver. And so how do we reconcile the fact that 30 to 40,000 people die a year in the United States because of traffic accidents? And we actually have the anecdote. We have something that would fix that. And it also adds so much when it comes to mobility. So when we think about Waymo here in the District of Columbia, we think about, one, it's our nation's capital, and we would love to be able to showcase that technology. But we also inherently want to make sure that our roads are safer. And that's what the Waymo driver and what Waymo would like to come to the district to do.
I want to go back to you, Anwar, because when you talked about, we're still talking about opportunities. We want to talk more about safety, but opportunities. And you talked about employment opportunities, but also the council member mentioned accessibility, with other vehicles that we can hire in the district. We've heard the stories about the taxi cab drivers that used to pass us all on the street all the time. But what about accessibility and, the economic opportunities? Do you see a future there?
Well, the economic opportunities where people have jobs and they can't get to work on time. Or people, if you live in Southeast, to give you a good example, and you work in Northwest or work on 8th Street, and you have to leave 5 o'clock in the morning or get to a place 5 o'clock in the morning or late at night if you leave in 8th Street late at night, and people may not want to come to the quarter, because of what they think or the perception of what's going on in these neighborhoods. And you get another driver in another company, they opt out, or they're going to charge you a higher fee just because they can to a certain degree. We've seen this. And if you have an autonomous vehicle, guess what? You don't have to worry about a person showing up. You have a vehicle showing up. And I think that's huge. In 8th Street in the city, I think that's huge. So that gives you a chance to really service neighborhoods equitably versus other companies. I think so.
Is that true, Tiffany, though? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I would add to that one, we have lots of options here in the District of Columbia, but I can say sometimes I always talk about my imaginary husband when I have a ride-hailing driver pick me up from my house because, I want to feel safe and I, feel as if I need to do that in order when I'm engaging with a driver. Waymo removes that as a part of the equation. It's a safe alternative for women who, whether there's anxiety or discomfort, when I'm having somebody pick me up at my house at 4:30 a.m., I don't necessarily want to, lots of questions about who I live with and what I'm doing. And so that's one of the most important things. If we look at our power users of Waymo, it is women who feel much safer in Waymo. When it comes to issues of equity, Waymo doesn't see color. It literally is an autonomous driving machine that will come to all wards. We have driven hundreds of thousands of miles here in the District of Columbia, every single ward. And so those issues of not being picked up in Ward 7 or Ward 8, that's not an issue with Waymo, and they will come pick you up. It doesn't matter what time. And if you think about workers, it's kind of like if you're doing shift work and you're getting off work like late at night, you want a safe option. And so Waymo provides that and adds to kind of the ecosystem here in the District of Columbia.
Well, that's good to know. There's no zip code discrimination happening with Waymo. The other part to this, and when it comes to safety, is as Councilmember Allen talked about, are these crazy intersections that we have, and these aggressive drivers, and all of that. How is Waymo sort of structured to make sure that it can safely maneuver?
Well, one of the things we have actually been able to drive 220 million miles autonomously, and that includes the hundreds of thousands of miles that we've driven in the District of Columbia. And I can't say that I've driven down every street in the District of Columbia. And so the great thing is that each vehicle learns from the other, and it's able to understand through simulation, but also through direct driving autonomously, kind of what those intersections. And since we are currently in 6 states and 11 cities, we've seen most terrain and challenges, but DC has unique challenges, and that's why we work closely with the community so that when we're engaging with these different intersections or spots, that we are getting feedback from our users on how to traverse those, how to engage those. And so as we continue to drive in the District of Columbia, we have the benefit of having driven all of those miles and getting those learnings. So there's not something that we've encountered in the district that we haven't seen elsewhere.
You know, I want to add to that. When I was at the facility, we had a chance to experience Waymo, and then we had a chance not to experience it. And we found ourselves in an area where we end up in the wrong lane with a bunch of traffic coming to us. And fortunately, we were able to get back in the other lane, and we all laughed at ourselves, and we said, no, Waymo wouldn't do that. Waymo wouldn't do that because it's safer. And I think that was another good experience, because if it was another situation and we were in that lane and it was a rush hour, it could have been a hard accident and all of us could have been hurt. So that gave me more confidence in really saying, no, this is a good ride versus us being out here doing what we're doing. You know, so I think that's where society is going. And with autonomous driving, I think we should embrace it. You look at someone getting off of work or coming from a club, and let's say they had too much to drink or they're too tired. I have a son who got off of work late. He was in a serious accident, almost lost his life. But if it was a Waymo driver, it was another situation and he wasn't driving his own vehicle, I think more people would not go through that and it would save their lives. You know, they wouldn't have to go through that. So I think the Waymo system is a very good system to give you an option.
One of the things that even folks said to us when we talked about having this event here at the Atlas is there's no parking. Where are you going to park, right? And that's a problem on H Street, period. Well, it's a problem in a lot of places now, but on H Street. And so how do you think Waymo will benefit the businesses on this corridor?
Well, I think not only Waymo would benefit, I think we would benefit if we can partner with Waymo and do some type of promotion and partnerships to pull people in and off of the corridor. I think that gives us an opportunity versus if you had another type of company where you have individual drivers. I don't think they will have that opportunity because they working off of another salary cap. And I think with Waymo, you can look at that, and I think you have an opportunity to partner with them and do something different. That's a conversation I think that could be had.
And I think curb management system, I think that's kind of the next frontier. And like we want to work with local partners to do that. The benefit of Waymo is that we're all we are centrally kind of dispatched. And so we can manage kind of our fleet size kind of to go up and down based on traffic. I know that was something that the council member mentioned, so that we would be able to kind of, manage up and down depending on kind of the need and the interest.
Tiffany, who would be your customers?
Me. I found, we've done surveys of riders. Again, I said our power users are women and people of color. I think people who are interested in getting from point A to point B, and they want as many options as possible. It's someone, again, like we mentioned, coming off shift work that doesn't want to, have to engage with someone. It's someone who just wants some quiet on the way home. Like they don't necessarily want to have to engage with someone. But I think it's that person getting off the metro that wants to get that last mile and get home. I think there's so many opportunities. A lot of the support that we've gotten has been from the disability and accessibility community on how we create more agency and more freedom of movement and mobility for those who may have low vision, may be blind. But we also understand that we want to make sure that, with Waymo, we can provide those greater choices for mobility in the district.
We have, we're fortunate in DC because we have such a diverse population here, but we've got a lot of seniors too. Have you determined whether, seniors themselves would say yes or no? I've talked to a couple who said absolutely not, and then came back and said, but I would try it. So, but I'm just curious if when you talk about the population, if that's a group that you think Waymo would also have as a customer.
Definitely, and I think we're actually in the district working with organizations that are focused on seniors and mobility. I'm trying to think, would my mother have taken Waymo? She probably would say no, never. But she actually was an early adopter of technology. So I would like to think that she would kind of jump at the opportunity.
I definitely would.
But again, I mean, as we continue to age in place, as we continue to have caring for parents and being in the same households, the ability to have that type of mobility for seniors where you don't have to wait for, your child or something to take you someplace. It just opens up so much to kind of live life and continue to have some longevity and agency.
Well, I was saying that because my mother was one of those who said no, but I'd try it. So, and she probably, because she gets around the city. My husband and sons know that she traverses the city a lot of different ways, and I could see her telling me, "What's taking you so long? Get rid of that car." But talk a little bit about how Waymo is investing in the District of Columbia.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that distinguishes Waymo from kind of traditional ride-hailing services. I mean, those are, independent contractors. When Waymo comes to a city, we invest tens of billions of dollars. We hire locally. There's a lot of kind of focus on there not being a driver and like what that means to kind of the job ecosystem. But there's so many jobs that are part of our depot: electricians, mechanics, technicians, so fleet operators. And so we know, and those folks can't, it's not like, most tech companies where it's centralized at their headquarters. These are jobs that are local. Those would be individuals from the District of Columbia and surrounding areas that would have those jobs. And those are jobs with benefits. We found in our partnership with Lyft in Nashville that we, through a partner, FlexDrive, that a lot of former Lyft drivers actually changed to become part of kind of our fleet operations. And those are jobs, careers with benefits. So we've seen kind of the ability to shift like drivers to other roles that may be a better fit for their lifestyle. And so that's what we're looking forward to doing in the District of Columbia.
Is there an estimate of if and when this legislation passes and Waymo actually is in Washington, D.C., is there an estimate of how many vehicles will be on our streets?
Well, I think that's an open question. At first, I'd like to thank the council member for the legislation and bringing this issue to the forefront because it's important. Again, this is happening. This is everyday life in 11 cities in the United States, and we very much want to make it a reality here in the district. I think it's an open question on how many vehicles, and that the great thing about being centrally dispatched is that we can upsize or downsize depending on the need, and they're not just cars on the road. I think there was a comment earlier about kind of just idling, looking for rides. You wouldn't have those issues with Waymo. So again, we would love to serve the District of Columbia, and I think it would be additive to the current kind of ecosystem.
I think it's not about how many vehicles on the street. I think it's more about how many opportunities it creates, and I think it'll create tremendous number of opportunities.
But so Anwar, we talked a little bit about how it will benefit the businesses on 8th Street. Have you had conversations with some of the business owners? They know you they probably have your phone number on speed dial. Are they talking about Waymo themselves? Or autonomous vehicles? And
the ones I have, and they talking about 8th Street being an experience. And I think Waymo will help bring about that experience. We want 8th Street to be that neighborhood, that quarter of various experiences. And I think Waymo will help offer that.
Yeah, okay. So I've run out of questions on my list, so I am going to open this up to the audience as well if there's anybody out there that have questions. But you say you can't see? Oh, there we are. There are lights. Hey, everybody. Okay. I see a couple of hands. Yeah, help me out with some questions. We would certainly like to hear.
Hello?
Okay. Oh, I thought you had a mic.
Hi.
Hi, where are you?
Over here.
There you are. Okay.
Hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity to hear more about
Waymo. You mind introducing yourself and let us know
My
if
bad.
you're a district resident or not?
Hi, my name is Yetunde Okeshola. I am a district resident. I live in Ward 8. So definitely interested in accessible transportation. Does the conversation about Waymo in DC, does that by default include like Maryland and Virginia? I mean, if you are traveling to work in a different city or state, how does that impact the ability for Waymo to really take off in the district?
Well, we look forward to serving Virginia and Maryland as well, but currently the way it works is that it would be geofence for the District of Columbia, but we are actively engaged in conversations with Virginia and Maryland. We would love to serve the entire DMV.
So someone asked me this question before. If I'm in a club on 8th Street and it's late and I've had a couple of whatevers, these Waymo cocktails, but I live in Prince George's County, it won't take me home.
Not currently, but we look forward to the day that it will.
Okay. So I hope you have enjoyed that conversation. And remember, you can watch the entire panel discussion anytime by visiting Washington Informer TV on YouTube. For those who are just joining us, that was a segment from the town hall meeting the Washington Informer held in conjunction with Waymo, one of the autonomous driving contractors that's looking forward to operating in the District of Columbia. And that took place last week at the Atlas Theater. So you probably have questions, and that's why I want you to maybe go to the YouTube channel at some point. There were a bunch of questions the audience had, and your question might be there and the answer may be there. But I hope that you will also watch the council hearing on Monday that Councilmember Allen will be having at the DC Council. He says there are over 80 people who have signed up to testify, including the district government. And it's not just about Waymo. It's really about bringing autonomous vehicles to the District of Columbia. Is DC ready? Well, we will see. So again, you can visit WashingtonInformer.com, go to our website. We hope that if you go to YouTube, that you will sign up and become a member or subscriber of our YouTube channel. But you can also visit us at WashingtonInformer.com, which we hope you will. We want to bring, as you know, we strive hard to bring as much information as we can to the community to keep you informed so that you can help our legislators to make the right decisions on our behalf. And while you're there at the Informer site, sign up for our free daily newsletter, where you can get the latest edition of the newspaper delivered directly to your inbox. Or if you just happen to be one of those that wants to subscribe and have the paper delivered to your door, there's a way you can sign up there as well. In addition, while we're talking about it, I ask you all to friend us, share this broadcast, do whatever you can to help support the Washington Informer, and also be an informer. You too can be an informer by sharing this broadcast with your colleagues and following us on all of our social media channels. But moving on, last week in the nation, we celebrated America. Well, I'll say observed. Not all of us celebrated, but we observed America's 250th year of existence as an independent country. And although some Americans continue to question the patriotism of Black Americans, we want to share our video viewpoint where our reporters asked a few people if they were proud to be an American. Let's take a look.
Yes, I am proud to be Black American. Am I proud of the America that I live in today? Because it has not been very friendly to the African American. Like, there is hope. I have hope and optimism that will change, but it requires all of us to work together to make sure that we help our people advance forward. Right? That means, first of all, which has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, getting out to vote. Second thing is we have to learn to work together. That's one of the things I love about being in this space is meeting like-minded entrepreneurs. Again, I have hope and optimism that this country will become more favorable towards African Americans. I'm just not truly in favor of the current administration and the antics that they are up to.
I'm really proud to be a Black American in the sense that I know that my community and my state really ties me into my Black roots.
I am proud to be an American. I think our country does have a lot of issues and a lot of issues that are affecting our people. From my experience and perspective, other countries don't have the kind of mobility we have in the United States. Oppression is real, but I think we are in a blessed position that we can work hard and make a difference and change for our people.
Absolutely proud to be an American. It is great to give back to what has been such a foundation for America. Just to give back as an entrepreneur, to give back to the community, to give back to people, to contribute to such an amazing purpose. And it feels great to be an American, absolutely.
Well, are you proud to be an American? There's a question I don't think many of us talked about, and so we would love to hear your feedback. So feel free to email us at news@washingtoninformer.com, or you can visit us again on our social media channels where we ask folks that question and add your contributions. It's something I think that we all are talking about right now. This is also the 100th anniversary, as you know, of Black History of the year of celebration of Black history in the United States. So some people responded, were they proud to be a Black American? And others, were they proud to be an American? You take your pick. Whatever you want to answer, we certainly do want to hear from you. And we will be bringing you those viewpoints regularly here on Let's Talk. And hopefully one of our reporters may find you out there on the streets of DC, Maryland, or Virginia to pose a question and to get you engaged in the conversation. But anyway, now it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Dr. Lopez Matthews, who's a state archivist and public records administrator for the District of Columbia, and also a friend and a longtime member, as I talk about Black history, a longtime member of the African American Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and other organizations that really highlight Black America. I don't know if Dr. Matthews is there. There you are.
Here, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can see you. And I celebrate you for being with us today, because when we have this conversation about whether you're proud to be an American or not, all of this is what you kind of archive in your archives, correct?
I do. We preserve the story of the District of Columbia. The DC Archives is a part of the Office of the Secretary of the District of Columbia, and we are the official archive for the government of Washington, DC. And so we hold historic birth records, death records, marriage records, wills, agency records. Basically, if you would like to learn about Washington, DC, its government, and how the government has affected the people, you would come to our archive.
So, Lopez, I'm going to, Dr. Matthews, I'm going to start going back to something, because I was at an event and people have been very critical about how the district has maintained its archives. But you got some great news, right? Because now you're no longer in an alley. Well, you won't be in an alley, correct? Tell us that story and tell us, what is happening with the DC archives that the district residents should really celebrate.
Well, we are building a new building on the campus of the University of the District of Columbia. It's going to be a very large facility that can hold our entire collection. While DC is a district and a city, it does the work of a state. And so we produce that amount of records. So we need a state-of-the-art 21st century archive, and that is what we're building. So it is happening. And, you can, if you drive by UDC, you'll see the construction happening. And so that's exciting. We have also, in the Office of the Secretary, we've restructured the archives to better support research and researchers to help them find historic records. So now we have a digital archive. We have updated systems to manage the collection. We also have a digital preservation system to begin preserving electronic records, because that is the way of the future. So we've been doing a lot, both in the archives itself, as well as looking to improve the physical location of the archive. So good things are happening.
Oh, I want to say too, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me, but are you one of like the only, or are there other African American state archivists in the country?
Well, I am the only African American state archivist in the country. We are included in the Council of State Archives, or Council of State Archivists, because we are part of the United States. They're the 50 states and the 6 territories, including Washington, D.C. And I am the only African American, so looking to have more. So I do try to support that. So
and what was your journey there? How did you get interested in archival science? I guess I don't know what you would call it, but
yeah, it's archival science.
Okay.
I became interested after a professor of mine, Coppin State, Baltimore, took me to the National Archives for a research visit. I didn't realize that you could hold a document that was over 100 years old. So I held the document. I was like, wow, I didn't realize you could do this. And that inspired me. So then I came to DC 2004 to attend Howard University, because they have a public history and archival administration program. Then I got my PhD at Howard. Then I worked at the Maryland State Archives. Then I worked at the National Archives and the Howard Archive. And that kind of took me to the DC archives. I like to build things. So that's what inspired me about coming to DC archives.
So they're different archives, right? And so give us the picture of what DC has, because you have the DC archives, you've got the People's Archives, and I think there's another. You got Howard University's, Moreland Spingarn Room, Moreland Spingarn Archives, and they all collect different things. So tell us what the DC Archives focuses on as and distinguish that from the others.
So the DC Archives is the archives of the government of Washington, D.C. So you may hear about the People's Archive, which is at MLK, and it's great. That focuses more on the people of D.C., their everyday lives. You have the DC History Center that also focuses on that, and organizations. And for us, we really focus on the government records, and how the government has supported or not supported its people. We preserve the rights of the people, we preserve the laws, we preserve how policy is developed. And so that's our angle. We sort of focus on the government and how the government has affected its people.
And how would people use what's in your archives? Because I heard you say marriage records and birth records, but otherwise, why would people want to come to the DC archives?
So one of our most popular collections is our land records. The land transactions, property transactions, architectural plans, building permits. So if you see all of this construction happening around DC, most often that begins with a visit to the DC archives to find the original plans for the building, to find covenants for the building, because we hold those. And so that's probably one of our biggest, that's actually our oldest document in the collection, is a land record book from 1792, when the first land was sold for DC. And so you have that. Also, you need a copy of a will. Someone has passed away, you would come to us to see what happened. Birth and death records. Where's my family from? Doing genealogical research. And so photographs, we have a lot of photographs in our collection. How has DC changed over the years? So it's a lot of varying things, because the government touches people in so many different ways. And sometimes you don't even think about, like, why is this apartment the way it is? How was this built here? Did they have permits to build that? This fence that's here, why is this fence here? Was it permitted? We would hold the permit. So between us and the Department of Buildings, we hold those records. So
And covenants, I would think too.
Yeah,
Laws
covenants.
that prohibited, allow people to live in certain places and prohibited people from living in certain places. And how the city expanded too, I would
Yeah,
think. You know, if you're
it-
going to do some research on, what was Washington, D.C., and then, how it grew,
yeah,
right?
how it grew, how it
Yeah.
shrank, when Alexandria left DC through retrocession,
Mhm.
so it really tells the story of the development of DC. Also, the different forms of government. When DC was a territory in the 1870s, then DC goes under the Board of Commissioners era till we get home rule in 1973. And then the development of DC government under home rule, which is documented in our archive. That's a remarkable sort of time period in DC history. What are the different phases of DC? How has it become the world-class international city that it is? And that's told through the records, not sort of hearsay.
So are you all, I'm thinking because, I think about the government, I think about, like you said, the agencies, I think about the mayor and the council. I think about, ANC commissioners. I mean, all these people that serve the government on behalf of the people. Are they contributing? Are you all getting information from these different entities to put into the archives? And if so, and if not, I mean, how would people know what to contribute? Or to
So
donate, I should say.
we do get those records from the agencies. There is a thing called a record schedule that says what's supposed to happen to all government records, what's permanent, what's temporary, and the time periods that those things need to be preserved. And so that tells you what you should give to the DC archive. So we get transfers from the agencies regularly to preserve the history. So that's made available in perpetuity. So that's what the mayor would look at for transferring records to the archives. That's what the council, well, not the council members, but DC agencies would look at to transfer records to the archives. And we work with them to do that.
That's and what about the ANCs? Because I mean, a lot of them, I don't know if they're doing what.
Well,
if
we're
they're
working.
considering that. Let me put it that way.
We're working with the ANCs too to make it easier for them to submit their records to the archives as well.
Right,
We're
and that's
trying to
things
use-
like meeting minutes and
meeting minutes, agendas.
Mhm.
So the presentations that are presented at the meetings.
Mhm.
Now, they're doing video. So how to
Mhm.
transfer the video to the archives.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's a lot that we do and a lot of places that we touch. There are over 96 agencies in DC. So a lot to corral.
As we celebrated the 250th or just Black history in general, someone called me the other day and said, what do you think about this? And why are they leaving Black folks out? And I'm thinking, well, that's our job, right? We have to collect and preserve and present our documents where they can be properly stored. I mean, what would you tell the average everyday district resident about what's important, what to keep, what to donate? What advice would you give folks?
I would say, and the simplest thing is to, if you're not going to buy a fireproof safe, put it in a good box and put it in your closet. Anything that you feel is important to telling your family's story, obituaries, photographs, all that. Put them in boxes and put them in a closet. Don't put them in the basement. Don't put them in the attic. Attics leak, basements leak. Put it in your closet. And so that is my simplest explanation. Now, I would say, buy acid-free folders. I will add this, do not use tape. Tape is horrible and it will destroy everything you have. Don't use tape.
And I know it's funny because I always remember a guy that I met who collected Black memorabilia. He was a white guy, and he talked about how he would read obituaries in newspapers and kind of find out where people lived and go through the alleys and go through their trash cans. And it was an amazing collection that he had, because we tend to throw a lot of stuff away. Or let's say that person that put those in those boxes, they're no longer with us, and someone says, "What's in these boxes?" "Oh, just a bunch of papers," and they throw them away. So is there some proactive thing people should think about doing? It may not be, for the DC archives, but it might be for some other entity. But what
I
would you
say
tell?
that I would tell them that if you've collected information and you fear that your family won't preserve it, because they may not, you might be the only person who cares.
Right.
So I would donate it to an archive that has a mission similar to what you want to do. For example, at Howard, Moreland Spingarn is there. They preserve the global Black experience. If you have something significant, contact the archive. I spoke to a family member of a woman who was a sharecropper in Alabama. And they're like, oh, she has all this great material, those great photographs of her life, and she's 90, and we don't want her to pass away with this stuff just being here. And so I told them, contact Tuskegee University. They're in Alabama. They collect the story of Black people in Alabama, Black farmers. Contact them and see if they're interested in that collection. And so, you don't have to keep it. You can donate it and let the world benefit from what you're preserving.
Yeah.
And sometimes we take donations, not all the time, but sometimes.
At the DC archives?
Yes, sometimes if it fits a criteria. We have a policy on the website that says what we would take.
And what's the website?
So our main website, of course, we're under the Office of the Secretary, so you go to os.dc.gov, or we have, if you're looking at records, opr.dc.gov. And digital archive, as you see on the screen, is archives.dc.gov. Mm-hmm. So we have several different sites because they serve different purposes. But if you go to the Office of the Secretary site, you'll get to all of them. So you'll see the policies. And if you are looking to preserve digital things and scan, we do have our digitization policies on there. You can take those too and do them yourself.
Wow. Is there any programming that you all do that the public can participate in, or anything coming up?
We do have programming. You can go to our YouTube page. We do have a YouTube page, DC State Archives. You can check that out.
Blowing up.
We are, we're doing things. We just actually, on our social media pages, we're going to highlight our interns in the Office of the Secretary on the page. And so we have our first video out of a young man who's in high school, DC student who's going to another school outside of DC, but he back for the summer. So he's come to work with us to digitize some historic records. And so we're going to highlight the young people who we're teaching about preserving this history. And we do have programs from time to time, talking about different historical topics related to DC.
So is there anything that you would tell DC residents as they look at their place in the observance of the 250th anniversary? Of course, we have a lot of history to talk about here as it related to the revolution and George Washington, what have you. I don't think the District of Columbia we weren't here then, right? Were we?
No. So DC didn't come around until the 1790s.
Right.
But, we still have a story to tell. 1790s is still early. And so we have a place in the nation's history, and it's held in our records and in our archives. And so I say, visit them, take your children to see these historic documents and advocate for their preservation.
So before we go, because, that's what the archives does. It helps people who are writing books and telling stories to find the documents that they need that kind of fill the story out so they're not making things up. So before we go, I want to ask you, is there a story that you can share with us about maybe one item that you have in your archives from the early days that, there's a story around how you got it, or how many people come to see it, or, just something particularly as it may relate to African Americans in this area.
Oh, African Americans. Well,
I narrowed it. So the brain was going this way, and I'm sure I made it go that way.
One of the things that I found very interesting, I'll take it to me. My family, my great-grandparents were married in DC, and I found their marriage record in our marriage records in the archive. Wow. I looked it up and I said, oh, there's my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. And I said, this marriage is what created me. And so I made a copy of it and shared it with my family and say, hey, here's our history in DC. And I just thought it was great, to just learn about myself.
Right.
But then we also have, and there's a book that we have in the archives, and it is called the Slave Jail Commitments. And it's a ledger that documented enslaved people who were held in the DC jail, either because the person who held them in bondage was visiting DC and feared they would run away, or they did run away and were caught in DC. And just reading the things, you're like, wow, this happened.
Wow.
Or even I mentioned the land records. There are people who are enslaved, documented in the land record books because they were property. And it really puts it in perspective. It puts history in perspective when you look at the raw documents and you see that, it wasn't necessarily all of this emotion put into it. It was just business.
Right.
And I think that really helps people to put history in perspective. Sometimes people are afraid to learn about history because they don't have the proper perspective to understand what it means, And so I think looking at actual documents, no commentary, no interpretation, just looking at the raw document really helps people to understand what history is. And that's why I love archives, and that's why I love working with documents. That's why I try to let the staff work, but sometimes I'll be like, ooh, what are you looking at? What is that? Let me look at these pictures. We're digitizing Marion Barry's pictures right now. And I just go and I look through and I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. Oh, look at this. Look at what Anacostia Park looked like, or look at what this part of town looked like before all of the change happened. And it's fun to me. So I love it.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's stark because people who've lived here for at least since he came have seen how the city has changed and have great memories about that too. So, yeah, well, I could ask you a zillion trillion questions about just what you have and your experiences and what's there and the treasure trove that the DC Archives is. So, but I want to thank you. I know you have to go and we're at the end of we've actually extended it, but I want to thank you for being with us today and keep us up to date on what's happening with the new archives at UDC.
I certainly will. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one,
you
Dr.
too.
Matthews. All right. We'll talk soon.
Great to speak with you.
All righty. So I want to thank all of you all for watching Let's Talk. We appreciate you spending part of your day with us, and we hope that you got something out of this, both of our conversations or all of our conversations today, particularly as it relates to autonomous vehicles, as well as our DC archives. This summer we have about 7 interns working with us, but one's working virtually, and they have been very busy. Earlier this week, one of our interns had the opportunity to talk to the vice president at Target and asked about the boycott. And we hope to have a Target representative join us next week to discuss what they are doing in the community. If not, we will have the video along with the intern, Jordan, a student from Elon University, who's with us, who is writing the story, and you can read it in next week's issue of the Washington Informer. Another one of our interns, Will, was out yesterday for the NFL's 2027 Draft Source Program, where the NFL officially welcomed the businesses selected to support the production of the 2027 NFL Draft. As you know, that will be hosted in the District of Columbia. So we look forward to hearing Will tell us about that experience. Be sure to visit us at WashingtonInformer.com for the latest news and information affecting our community. Subscribe. If there's a subscribe button on your YouTube channel, please push that button because we certainly do want you to be a member of the Washington Informer family. Subscribe to our newsletters and follow us on social media and on Washington Informer TV, as I said, on YouTube. Until next time, I'm Denise Rollard Barnes, going to get some water. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.